Dad, do you love Mom?
I do.
How much?
Gobs and gobs.
Dad, do you love my brother?
Connor? I do.
How much?
Gobs and gobs.
Dad, do you love God?
Yeah.
How much?
Gobs and gobs.
Dad, do you love me? Dad,
I do.
how much? I already know.
Gobs and gobs. Yeah.
Dad, how much is a gob?
Well, let me put it like this. Your favorite color is yellow. And when you eat those Nutter Butter cookies, you always scrape the peanut butter out of the middle and you secretly feed it to the dog because you think the dog deserves a treat too. At nighttime, I know before you go to bed, you always pull your Barbies all together because you don't want them to be lonely. And sometimes when you get a little nervous, you bat your eyes like this. They get really, really, really fast. But when you're happy and when you're excited, you always twirl your hair right beside your ear. And you love your mama's red earrings. And you always seem to eat your green beans one at a time. You see, my love, I notice you. And I love being your daddy. And I will always be here for you. Even on your best days, even on your worst days, your daddy loves you and will always be here for you. And that, my dear, that's what a gob is.
I gob you too, Daddy.
Hello, and I'm glad you're joining us at Grace Generation Church at Home today. I'm Pastor Tom, and I'd like to tell all the fathers out there, Happy Father's Day. If this is the first time that you've joined us, could you take a moment and send an email to me at pastortom@gracegenerationchurch.net, or you can just text the word welcome to 509-291-8404. Well, as I said, today is Father's Day, and today I want to talk mostly to the men watching. Ladies, I'm sure you're going to find something useful too, but my main audience today is going to be the guys. And I mean all guys, not just the fathers. I've titled today's teaching, Where Have All the Warriors Gone? And let me say up front, there may be a few feathers ruffled today. I'm encouraging men to find the warrior in them, and I know that goes against a lot of what this modern movement would want men to be. I'm not talking about men becoming more physically violent, but I am talking about standing up against the violent forces that are presently coming against everything that is associated with the kingdom of God. There is some tendency towards violence that I believe is placed in a man, and he discovers it at a very young age. I can remember as a grade schooler getting in a lot of fights. I mean, a lot of fights. I was taller and bigger than most of my classmates, and so I became something of a target. My father had taught me never to start a fight, but I could finish one if someone else started it. Now times have changed, and I don't think many people would agree with that kind of parenting, but that's the way I was raised. So being the big kid on the playground, a lot of kids wanted to take me on, and while I never threw the first punch, I finished quite a few fights. If I remember right, the last fight I had was in school at the 7th grade. It was about that time that we started playing sports, and so a lot of the aggression that the guys experienced was expressed on the football field and the wrestling mat. I really believe, though, that God has placed that in a man for a reason, because we were designed to stand up against things that are wrong. And I think as kids, we first begin to stand up for ourselves and defend what we see is right, as we should, because if we never learn to do that, then how is it a young man is ever going to stand up for a woman? How would he be able to stand up for those who are oppressed or those who can't stand up for themselves? So I want to start today by holding up this sword. This sword represents a warrior on attack. There are times when other forces and other people go too far, and they cross lines that no one should cross. And it's then that the warrior needs to draw his sword and attack. So here's the first thought for today, guys. You were created with the heart of a warrior. The Bible tells us that when God created mankind, he created male and female. Now, if you're buying into the latest modern thinking, you might not agree with that, but I didn't say that, so you can take that up with God. When mankind was created, they were created in the likeness and image of God. And that means a lot of things. God is many things, and there are many different powerful metaphors that we can see in Scripture that describe who God is and what he is like. The one I want to look at right now is found in Exodus 15:3. The Lord is a warrior. Yahweh is his name. God has hardwired into the heart of every man a desire and a need to fight for what is right. He designed men to stand up for what is true and pure and just. I know that this kind of makes some people cringe. I imagine someone is thinking, aren't we a church that's founded on grace and mercy and love? It seems that those two things don't go together, Pastor. Well, it's absolutely true. We, just like Jesus, should be full of love and mercy and grace in all that we do. It should be the filter that we live our lives through. See, Jesus embodied God's love, mercy, and grace. He liked hanging around with kids, and he blessed them. We can think of him as a shepherd going out to search for that one sheep that was lost and then carrying it gently back to the fold on his shoulders when he found it. That's all true, but it's also not a complete picture of who he was. The reality is that the most loving person who ever lived was also the greatest warrior who ever lived. Read through the Bible and you will discover that Jesus was willing to stand up for what was right. He didn't use his fists, but more than once he stood up to the Pharisees and made them back down. There was a time when those religious leaders had pushed and pushed and pushed him, and they finally crossed the line. And in Matthew 12:34, he said this, "You brood of snakes, how could evil men like you speak what is good and right? For whatever is in your heart determines what you say." Now, we don't quite get the full meaning of this because we don't understand what an insult it was to be called a snake in those days. It was a terrible slur, especially to someone who considered themselves religious. There was a time when Jesus went into the temple and he saw how men had corrupted the house of God from a place of prayer and fellowship with his Father and had turned it into a flea market where they were doing nothing but making a profit off of all of the people coming to pray. He saw it and he said, "No, you have crossed the line. This isn't right and I'm going to do something about it." So he sat down and he made a whip and he started knocking over the tables and drove the merchants out of the temple. There was a time when he revealed himself as the Son of God to the people of his hometown in Nazareth. They were furious because in their mind, this was just the son of Joseph. How could he say that he was the Son of God? It made them so upset that they forced him to the edge of a cliff and intended on pushing him over. But Jesus said, "No, this is not going to happen." And it doesn't tell us how, but it says that Jesus walked through the crowd. I'd like to think that he let them go so far, and then he turned around and he said, "Stop. If you want a piece of me, come on. If not, get out of my way." And when people recognized the warrior that he was, they just let him go. Okay, maybe it didn't happen that way, but it could have. But what I do know happened is that he fought the greatest battle in history and won. He lived a perfect life, and then he suffered a humiliating death on the cross in what looked like a total defeat. But 3 days later, he came walking out of the tomb, and he was a triumphant warrior, having conquered death, hell, and the grave. Let's not forget the vision that the Apostle John gave us in the book of Revelation. He saw Jesus returning not as a sacrificial lamb, but more like the Lion of Judah. Listen to this description starting in Revelation 19. "Then I saw heaven opened, and a white horse was standing there. Its rider was named Faithful and True, for he judges fairly and wages a righteous war. His eyes were like flames of fire, and on his head were many crowns. A name was written on him that no one understood except himself. He wore a robe dipped in blood, and his title was the Word of God. Then in verse 15, from his mouth came a sharp sword to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron rod. He will release the fierce wrath of God, the Almighty, like juice flowing from a winepress. On his robe at his thigh was written this title, King of all kings and Lord of all lords. Friends, that will really happen. The one who is full of grace and truth is also the one full of justice and judgment. The one who was the lamb who was slain before the foundation of the earth is the warrior who will return to set all things right. He is both the greatest servant who ever lived and the greatest warrior who ever lived. So the question is, where have all the warriors gone? I know that it's a politically incorrect question to ask. Where have all the men of God gone who are willing to stand up against the powers and principalities that are trying to destroy everything and everyone that God holds dear? The truth is, even though it seems like it, this isn't a problem that is created by our popular culture. It isn't because of the invent of video games or televised sports that we can't find them. There's a tragic verse where God was looking for such a warrior but couldn't find one in Ezekiel 22:30. So I sought for a man among them who would make a wall and stand in the gap before me on behalf of the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found no one. Isn't that a little depressing? God is saying, one, I just need one. One man who will be the stopgap. One warrior who will live righteously and defend the innocent, but I found none. He's asking the question, where have all the warriors gone? Today we might ask, where have all the strong men of God gone? Now I know they exist, but what I see when I look at our current society is that it's trying to turn men into women. I know some will disagree with me on this, but God made men and women to be different. And the truth is, men don't make good women. Mostly because men are just too simple. Just look at the way guys compliment and comfort each other. For example, years ago, a buddy of mine had a motorcycle accident, and he ended up in the hospital. It was pretty serious, and they had to take him by ambulance to Seattle. So I drove over there a couple days later to see him. Now, I was concerned about him, and so I wanted to give him a gift that expressed how I felt about him. So I picked up some training wheels and a balloon that said, "It's a girl," right? I'm rubbing it in that he fell off his bike, and I want everyone coming in to see him to ask about the balloon. He got that, and he knew how much I cared about him. It worked. My wife just didn't get that. She thought I was being so offensive that it would probably make him mad, but then she's not a man. See, it wouldn't work with a lady. I mean, I visited women who were in the hospital and done nothing remotely like that. Why? Because it wouldn't be appropriate. She's a lady. Wives, that's why when you expect your husband to be like your girlfriend, it doesn't work. You married a man. Let your man be a man and appreciate that he is a man. Stop trying to feminize him. Too many wives are expecting their husbands to become something they are not wired to become. But if you would just stop and realize that God made men to be men and women to be women, and that the two were made to complement one another, then something amazing will happen. When you allow a man to be a man, he will grow a servant's heart. He will feel empowered to be the protector of your family and will step up to meet the needs that you have. I'm not trying to diminish a woman's ability to take care of herself or to meet her own needs. I'm just saying that men are waiting for their wives to say, "Be the man God made you to be." Let God develop your man and stop trying to do it yourself. You can stop by learning to quit telling him what he's not. Stop treating him like your little kid brother or one of your children. He's your husband. Most guys I know are painfully aware of what they're not. They know their weaknesses and their shortcomings all too well. They don't need you to keep reminding him of them. Start building him up. Start allowing him to do those things that he can do well. Support his journey to becoming a warrior that God made him to be, one who can stand up and fight for what is right. Now, guys, I'm not saying you become the He-Man, bully, bump me up guy. That's not what I'm driving at. but it's in our programming from our Creator that we have a desire to fight for what is right and become a warrior for a cause that is greater than ourselves. So let's look at two thoughts every warrior needs to keep in mind. Here's the first one. Find a cause to fight for. Something happens when we stop thinking only about our own interests and we begin to discover that we were created for something bigger than ourselves. There was a man named Nehemiah, and we read about him in the Old Testament. He was a cupbearer to the king. Now, that's a pretty subservient role. You don't get much training in being a warrior as a cupbearer, but God called him to do something more than bring the king his wine. He realized that God wanted him to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. Well, not everyone wanted that wall to be built, and so the Bible tells us about a couple of enemies who came against that effort. Two guys named Sanballat and Tobiah began to distract the people and destroy their progress on the wall. Listen to how this mild cupbearer has made the transformation into a warrior. You can hear it in his rallying cry to the people. Nehemiah 4:14. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, "Don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, for your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." Do you see? He's calling them in to have courage to become warriors for what is right and protectors for those who can't protect themselves. I can imagine that something happened in those men that heard that. Something came alive in them because they knew they had a cause that was bigger than themselves. It's just like those memorable scenes in those guy movies, right? I mean, we all know that there are guy movies and then there are chick flicks. Now, I'm not against those girly movies. I have to admit there have been some times when I've sat through and watched them with my wife, and I have been known to have an allergy attack in the middle of them, so I had to grab a tissue to blow on my nose or wipe my eye. And I know by admitting that I might have lost a few points with the guys. But what I'm trying to say is that the guy movies make me want to stand up and fight for what is right. You can't watch Saving Private Ryan without wanting to find a cause worth dying for. You can't watch Braveheart or Gladiator too many times. It never gets old to see Mel Gibson with his face painted blue riding on a horse and saying, "How many of you would trade all these days for just one day to come back and tell your enemies they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?" Every time it makes me think, man, I wish I was born then. I'd look great in blue paint, and I could fight for that kind of cause. And then I remember, well, that was before air conditioning and indoor plumbing and penicillin, okay? But it makes you long for a cause to fight for. So my question is, what is your cause? Some of you know what it is, but then there's others who need to discover it. There are some who need to get in the battle and fight for your marriage. Because if you don't do that, it won't be long and you won't have a marriage. Too many guys in our day just say, it's too hard, and they walk away. Where have all the warriors gone? Those men who own up to their own weaknesses and their mess-ups, men who ask for forgiveness and choose to forgive their wives when they've been wronged. Men who become warriors for their marriage and love their wives like Christ loved the church. Some guys need to become a warrior for their kids. Maybe you've spent too much time at your career in providing for them that you forgot to care about them. Maybe it was because of some stupid thing that you did and you had to go away for some length of time. You just couldn't be there for them. And now your kids are heading in the wrong direction. Become a warrior for them. Maybe it's that you are in a financial boat that is sinking right now. It's time you become a warrior for your family. You choose to begin to say no to yourself, handle your money wisely, and you begin to fight so that you can set yourself financially free. For some, it might be an addiction that's been getting the best of you for years. Something you smoke or snort or drink, or maybe it's a website that just keeps drawing you back, and it's time for you to stand up and say, no more. I'm going to fight this fight. I'm going to be the warrior God made me to be, and with His help, I'm going to make a stand and say, no more. Martin Luther King put it this way: A man who does not have something for which he's willing to die is not fit to live. Every warrior has to find a cause that he was created to fight for. Here's the second thought. Without a cause, you will fight the wrong things. There is an example of this in the book of Acts. Most of you will know who Paul was. He was the man who wrote about 30% of the New Testament and became a warrior for the first century church. It was obvious from our vantage point that Paul was created for that cause. But before he did that, he was known as Saul. He knew that he was a warrior for something, but he hadn't discovered it yet. So he was fighting for the wrong thing. In Acts 8:3 we read, "But Saul was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women to throw them into prison." Paul, the warrior for the early church, was fighting against the very thing that he was built to defend. This is something that happens way too often with men. Let me just say that I know that there are probably some ladies who aren't comfortable with all this talk about warriors and fighting. If you haven't turned the video off already, let me just say I can guess why you don't like it. There have been far too many women and children who have been hurt by a man's strength. Far too many men who fought against the wrong things because they never found the right cause. I can only imagine how that experience has made you feel and the scars it has left you with. I do know this, that God's plan was never that men turn their power against women or children. Far from that. A man becomes a warrior to defend those who can't defend themselves. I don't really know how that will all be made right, but I know that we serve a God and He is the perfect judge. There is never a reason for a man to commit violence against those weaker than he is, those who have put their trust in Him. At the same time, realize that just because some men abuse it, strength is not a bad thing. When it's done correctly, as God ordained it, that strength can be used to demonstrate love. It's that strength that can protect you from forces that want to harm you. The problem is that it goes wrong when men are fighting for the wrong things. Guys, if you don't find the right cause, you will end up fighting against something. Sometimes it's authority. I mean, you'll be ready to take on your boss just because he's your boss. Sometimes you will end up fighting against the very people who want to help you. Some guys turn inward and they begin to really hate themselves, and it will manifest in violence towards anyone they are around. Other men, their wives, and some men it's even their children. So make sure that you are fighting the right fight, because without the right cause, you will be in the wrong fight. So how does a warrior fight? There are two ways that a warrior fights. The first one is sometimes you'll have to draw your sword. Now, just so no one accuses me of inciting an insurrection here, I'm speaking in metaphors. If someone makes you mad today, don't pull out your pocket knife and threaten them and say, "Well, Pastor Tom said this is how I'm supposed to fight." I am not saying that. What I am saying is, spiritually speaking, you have to make a stand for what is right. One of the judges over Israel that we read about in the Old Testament was a man named Samson. Samson was a warrior. God had gifted him with amazing strength, but Samson was a weak, strong man. We read about how he messed up again and again and again. He was ultimately betrayed by a woman named Delilah to the Philistines. Defeating the Philistines was Samson's cause. That's what he was born to do, to defeat them. But they ended up cutting off his hair because they discovered his hair was a secret to his strength. Because he messed up, instead of defeating the Philistines, they actually imprisoned him and they blinded him. And then they would put him on display as a vanquished foe during banquets. It was during one of these banquets that we read that Samson comes back to the cause he was created for. Judges 16:28. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me again, O God. Please strengthen me just one more time." He's saying, "Lord, give me one more chance to do what I know I was born to do. I don't need two chances here. I know what my cause is now. I know why I was created. I just need one more chance." You ever been there? I'm so sick and tired of this thing defeating me. I'm done with it. No more. God, just give me one more chance. I won't ask for more because I finally get it. I finally know what I'm supposed to fight for. I'm ready to pull out my sword and be the warrior for the right cause. God answered Samson's prayer. This is what happened in Judges 16, 29, and 30. Then Samson put his hands on the two center pillars that held up the temple. Pushing against them with both hands, he prayed, "Let me die with the Philistines." And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. He found his purpose. He pulled out his sword and took a righteous swing, and when he did, he killed more of the Philistines in that one act than he had in his entire life. Guys, sometimes we have to do that. We have to stand up for what we know is right. Now, in one sense, it's easy to do that. I mean, one act and then you die, right? You're a hero, but it costs you your life. And most of the guys I know would do this. Someone breaks in their home in the middle of the night, they would immediately be ready to defend their wife and kids. All of them are like, "Man, you're not getting to my family unless it's over my dead body." I mean, you might be standing there in your whitey tighties and all you have in your hand is a lamp that you grab, but you're taking them on, right? And it cost you your life. So be it. You know why that is? Because God created you with the heart of a warrior. But a far greater challenge is to choose to die every day, to choose to serve your wife day in and day out, to sacrifice what you want so your kids can have what they need, day after day, year after year. It's even harder to help others who desperately need help, but maybe when you look at the situation, you don't think they deserve it. Those who have lost their way and they've lost their hope. It's far easier to fight for the weekend, to fight for yourself. It's all about the weekend. You know, it's about my boat or about my golf clubs. It's about my buddies and the brews. It's easier, but it leaves you empty, feeling like, is this all there is? I saw a bumper sticker on a car the other day and it said, "Only one life, make the most of it," right? Guys, only one life. So don't waste your passion and your calling on just enjoying life for yourself. Find your cause. Look around until you see something that bothers you so much that you're ready to swing your sword. Find your cause, then do something about it. Don't be okay with kids who don't have dads in their lives. Do something. Don't be okay with a buddy who's working 3 jobs just to keep his head above water. Do something about it. Swing your sword and help him out. Find something that makes you say, "This is not going to happen on my watch. I'm going to help those who can't help themselves. I'm going to swing my sword." So sometimes, to fight like a warrior, you pull out your sword. And then sometimes, you turn the other cheek. We started out today talking about how Jesus is a warrior. But Jesus also knew when to draw the sword and when to turn the other cheek. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, it was in the Garden of Gethsemane that the Roman soldiers came to take him away. And Peter was ready to be a warrior. He saw what was going on, and he drew his sword and cut off one of the soldiers' ears. Now understand, Peter wasn't going for the ear. He was aiming for the head, but evidently the guy ducked. And Jesus stopped Peter, and he healed the man's ear. He was like, "Peter, now is not the time to fight. Now is the time to turn the other cheek." He didn't fight Judas. Instead, he allowed Judas to come up and give him the kisses of betrayal on his cheeks. What I'm trying to say is that our best weapon isn't a sword or a gun or a punch. Often our best weapon is allowing God's love to flow through us to those who deserve it the least. Some of you know how to fight. I mean, some of you have been in a lot of fights, and maybe you've won most of them. Some of you need to learn how to fight. Not like a man, because any guy can take his fist and cause pain. You need to learn how to fight like a man of God. You need to learn how to turn the other cheek and say, "You know what, honey? I haven't been the man I should be. Will you forgive me?" Kids or grandkids, I'm sorry I've been so wrapped up in my hobbies or work and just interests of my own that I haven't been there for you. Maybe turning the other cheek for you is forgiving someone who has done something to you that seems almost unforgivable. But you man up. You become a warrior and you say, "Because Christ has forgiven me, I forgive you." Here's the deal, gentlemen. We are only as strong as we are honest. I want to challenge you today to get really honest with yourself. What is your cause? What is it that you are called to be a warrior for? If you can't answer that question, then you need to spend some time alone listening to God speak. You need to search his heart until you can define what battle it is that you're a warrior for. What is it in this time, in this season of your life, that God is strengthening you to fight for? Maybe it's a somebody who can't defend themselves. For someone, it might be your marriage. Others, it might be financial freedom for your family. Or maybe it's some addiction or habitual sin that you need to defeat. Maybe it's the monster inside that you need to defeat. You might need to overcome an anger problem that you have. God will speak to you if you will seek him. He will tell you, stand in the gap. He will give you the strength to make a difference. D.L. Moody, the great evangelist of the 19th century, was challenged by something he heard when he was just a shoe salesman. He heard a preacher say, the world is yet to see what God can do through one man wholly surrendered unto him. And D.L. Moody thought about that for a moment, and he said, I'll be that man. I'll be that man. Guys, you can be that man. You can say, here am I surrender to you. Where have all the warriors gone? They're here, watching me. God is looking for his warriors, and that warrior is you. If you know what God is calling you to fight for with him, I'd like to connect with you personally and help you in any way that I can. Could you just send me an email at pastortom@gracegenerationchurch.net, or simply text the word MORE to 509-291-8404. I'm ready and willing to support you in any way that I can. If you're local, I want to invite you to our in-person gatherings. We meet at 5601 West Clearwater Avenue in Suite 103 in Kennewick every Sunday at 10 a.m. To close, let me paraphrase Joshua 1:6-9. Be strong and courageous, for you are a warrior of God. Be strong and very courageous. Listen to his voice and do all that he says, and you will be successful in all that you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.